I stopped using Instagram a long time ago, and I've also faced a number of bans and other shadow bans as well as actual bans and different types of restrictions there. But in the early 20s, like right before COVID times, I decided that if I spent a little bit less time scrolling social media, maybe I could do something like write a book. And now we can see almost 5 years later, the effect of that was that I wrote a book. So I think a lot of people don't realize how much time is stolen from them just with social media apps on their.
Welcome back to the Curious Tycoon Podcast today. Today's guest didn't just break the internet, he rewrote its rulebook. From engineering bots that helped clients gain followers to designing systems that keep us all hooked, feeds, notifications, and everything in between. Tim is here to pull back the curtain on the social media underworld. He has an Amazon bestseller, Framed, a villain's perspective on social media. Buckle up, guys. Let's dive in. So without no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Tim O'Hearn. Hello, Tim. I hope I've pronounced your last name correctly.
You got it right, Chucks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, great. It's awesome to have you on the podcast. It's a really sunny afternoon in London at the moment as we're approaching the summer months. Tim, what would you rather be doing right now than to be sat, in front of your screen?
Yeah, it's a decent day here in New York. Started off a little chilly, but I already ran my 10 miles this morning, so now just podcasts this afternoon.
Awesome, 10 miles. So we've got a runner here. Are you prepping for a marathon, or is it just a hobby of yours?
Yeah, I'm in the New York City Marathon, so I qualified on time for later this year. So early November, that's my target race.
Guys, we don't just have a tech guy here, we also have an athlete. It's great to have you on, Tim. Just before we dive in and get into the bits and pieces, tell us a bit about yourself.
My background is someone who grew up in the 90s and saw a lot of this internet culture and early tech innovations really come to the consumer space. So really, I'm someone who grew up with the internet and then learned how to program. My training is as a software engineer. I have a degree in computer science, and I spent the first 10 years of my career essentially working in quantitative trading. So a branch of finance where you typically use statistics and different branches of computer science and programming to generate money for a trading firm. For me, aside from that, I try to do quite a bit as far as technical writing, persuasive writing, and I have some exciting hobbies as well. I'm a pretty serious endurance athlete.
Yeah, you've just told us one there. You've just told us about the running. You've just told us about the running. What of that, hobbies do you have?
A lot of it does revolve around being outside, which I think is good when paired with a desk job that doesn't exactly bring you much sunlight or any exposure to the outside world. So a lot of things, like I'm really into cycling. Last year, I competed in High Rocks, which is like a new age version of CrossFit, a little bit more toward endurance athletes. And they actually just had High Rocks in New York City this weekend. I did not compete, but I'm always finding ways to kind of push myself and to train and break down these barriers.
Yeah, that's what we do here, man. So you are just the best. I think the best guests. I go deep, guys, to get you the best guests that you can have, because on here, we're curious people, we're curious minds, and we all want to be tycoons in our various sectors, tech, sales, whatever it is, business, whatever area that we are in. Once again, you're welcome to the podcast today, Tim. It's great to have you. Let's start with behind the curtain a little bit. Let's start with your book that you wrote, Framed, and why choose the villains. So what inspired you to write that book, Framed, and why did you choose the villain's perspective to tell this story?
I wrote Framed, the villain's perspective on social media. And the funny thing about it is the title that you see today, the subtitle that you see today, this is really the third or even fourth version of the book that I originally set out to write. I knew that I had this unique experience in having broken the rules industrially on Instagram and having done a lot more in this gray area a space where I was violating terms of use or coming very close to violating terms of use. As I went further and further through life, I realized that none of my peers from this space had really addressed what we did back then. And it was kind of this missing piece of history where we had a few journalists who covered it quite well. And then everybody just moved on to TikTok. And even when reaching out to some of these journalists, the response honestly has been quite muted. And I think that's a shame. So the point for me was not to brand myself and then try to sell people a course or try to sell people a product or direct them to a new business. It was a very pure interest here where I needed to tell a story because nobody else was willing to tell it. And as time went on, it did end up getting some more aspects of a memoir of kind of my life before and after what I did on Instagram.
Awesome. I love to bring creatives here. I love to bring people who are critical thinkers, who are thinking outside of the box. So again, you've built bots and engineered user addiction. That might seem like a lot. So do you see yourself as part of the problem, the solution, or something in between? But first of all, tell us what are bots, just for people who do not know what these are.
In Framed, I detail two aspects of persuasive technology and the role that I played. The first and the most significant is that I built follow-unfollow bots on Instagram. This means that a customer would sign up for my service, they would provide their login details, my bot would log into their account, and then begin interacting with targeted users with the goal of receiving follows or comments or likes in return. So that concept was follow and follow, and then eventually you would unfollow the accounts that were originally followed. But the idea was that your like count, your follow count, etc., would grow over time. I built those bots. Maybe I didn't perfect them, but I know that some of the systems I built were absolute top of the class for the time period. The second aspect of persuasive technology was during my time actually working at a technology company. So not Facebook, not Twitter, but I worked at a much smaller social media startup. And because it was such a small company, I was able to have complete control over certain aspects of the technology platform, which most people will realize when I say I built the newsfeed. Most people today have a pretty good idea of what the newsfeed consists of. I built the notification stream. Most people have received a notification, probably several today. And I also built recommendation systems. So meaning like, how do I give users more relevant content to them? All of this was part of my job there. So really I approach it from these two different.
So, the second part of the question is, what do you see yourself as then? Are you a problem here? Are you creating problems for us? Are you trying to solve, you bring solutions to them? Or is it just somewhere in between that you are?
Most people, if faced with the same potential to make money as I was starting in 2017, would definitely have chosen to make money. Yeah. Because the effect on the platform or the end user at scale, of course, is it's a disadvantage. There are consequences to it. It's a net negative. However, it's hard to be placed in the same category as people who are doing much worse things on social media, like people who were selling gray area pharmaceuticals, people who were stalking people who use it to communicate with other criminals. We weren't the top priority, and I think that shows because of how the industry proliferated during that time. In designing these feed algorithms and thinking about persuasive technology systems, yes, you could say I was a villain or I was not a good guy, but we can also look to companies like Meta and realize that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of employees whose entire job description is based around harnessing human attention spans. So I'm really no different from them, and I think the book almost has this play on words, or it has this entendre where the concept of villainy is continually morphing as you work through the 400-page book.
So basically, you are referring us to the book. We're going to obviously put links in the description below, guys. Everything that Tim has for us is going to be in the description. Just have a look at them. Have a look at his book as well. You sent it to me, and still going through it. Very interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot to learn. Myself, I've also learned, that follow for follow thing you mentioned. It's crazy on TikTok, that thing is crazy. People just want to follow you, and then, when you follow them back, you notice that you don't see them anymore. It's crazy. Maybe we'll get more into it, as we go on. But let's talk about Shadowbans. Yeah, Shadowbans. Is it real? Or is it just a social media, urban legend? What's that all about?
At this point, we can say that shadow bans are certainly real, and so are shadow restrictions, meaning a platform reserves the right to manually or semi-automatically adjust a user's exposure to an audience arbitrarily. So the concept of shadow ban is like, hey, you do something that's bad, but not worth your account being deleted. Maybe you will be shadow banned so you reach less people in the future. Of course, this is very controversial and dangerous because it constitutes a form of censorship.
Yeah, which is something a lot of organizations talk about. However, you always see that people, it's just based on your vantage point and what you support. I always also, just to ask you as well, I don't know what kind of insight you have, but I always wonder, is it possible to, let's say, I'm a content creator, right? Let's say YouTube, yeah? And I have, someone on YouTube, not necessarily that, someone on YouTube that works on maybe algorithm and or shadow ban section, who can say, is it possible for me to have a friend and say, okay, do you know what? This is the content I create. I want you to promote my content, and then I want you to make sure that every other person in this space, you sort of shadow ban them or limit. Are those kind of stuff possible? I always wondered.
We see different types of responses to what users observe. So if people are saying, hey, there are ways to get around the mainstream operation of certain algorithms, we will see behavior emerge that is both like destructive toward competitors or peers, and that also may subvert a shadow ban to begin with. So the first thing that I think you're referring to actually did have a name, which was called the mother-child method. And what mother-child was largely for adult content creators and other types of spammy accounts. They would figure, hey, it's pretty risky to be promoting my account in the way that I am. So I will create maybe 5 children accounts that are my identity that I control, and I'll use them to then funnel an audience back to the mother account. The idea, so you say, oh, could my friend do this? The idea is that maybe your friend then is the one who gets banned, but that at the end of the day, the followers should, at some rate, be bubbling up to the mother account. So yeah, in some cases we see that. We still see it today a little bit in these, well, it's used in a lot of scams now, but especially adult content. And then, when it comes to other ways of subverting shadow bans, we definitely, could we use what we think is going on to actually disadvantage our competitors? We see that more now in the search engine optimization space. So because black hat activity there is pretty well defined at this point, I have seen a number of accusations on LinkedIn that one competitor will attribute or link very spammy activity to one of their competitors, knowing that it'll rock their competitor's search ranking. So yeah, unfortunately, with some of these things, you can more or less set someone up to be disadvantaged by it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought people, whenever human beings are involved in things, there's always that level of bias. It's good to hear someone with that sort of knowledge tell us that, yeah, this is possible. I mean, we always knew anyway. We see it all the time. Let's talk a little bit of tactics, tension, tech. You've helped people generate money. See, move out $500,000 in your social media side hustle. What was the playbook?
So at Shark Social, we did generate over $500,000 in revenue. It's provable. I have the Stripe records. And also that's with a substantial profit margin, over 80% as well. So we ended up seeing a lot of that money as well. When running what was essentially a software as a service business, there's a lot that goes into the business aspect of it, the operations as well as the finances. And when we started doing this, we were, the oldest person at the business was 25. And two of us did have business degrees, but there really was no playbook for here's how you use Stripe and here's how you set up a way to, handle your cash flows from a subscription service. Up to that point in the mid-2010s, a lot of businesses were just one-time type of billing things. It wasn't that common to see these subscription type services, whereas now everything's a subscription. So a lot of us building the playbook was understanding how much cash we could account for, and then how to deploy it in meaningful ways, meaning what were the technology costs actually, and really what was the breakdown of our time between doing things like customer support, sales, or on my end, actually innovating on new features, or just trying to provide slightly better service to existing customers. All of this was baked into it because I'm sure you found as well, when you're a sole proprietor or you're involved with a small business, to actually value your own time. And I think that was the most important part of the playbook. As year one turned to year two and so on, we had to start figuring how much time we were putting into it and what the take was.
Yeah. AI is evolving. We hear about AI all the time. We see it's getting better and better and better. Lots of them now coming on. But what's this black hat marketing? What's that? I've not heard that before. And how has it evolved? Especially in this age of.
In my book, I introduced this concept of black hat marketing, and the basis is really in like old Western movies in the United States, where the sheriff would be wearing a white hat and the bad guy would be wearing a black hat. And as far as I know, this actually has a basis maybe also in like silent films, where even without audio, you have to understand who is who. So we reduce things actually to black and white. What's really interesting in the way that this was kind of transferred to the internet, and specifically search engine optimization was the first realm we saw it in, is that it introduces a layer between ethical, and moral and illegal. So really what black hat means is it might not necessarily be illegal, but you are likely violating the terms of service of a private business. And you may be doing this because you're able to generate some superior returns, superior results compared to doing things the right way. And that's the basis of black hat marketing, as it is in search engine optimization, social media growth, and even things that we still see today, like email spam that might happen to use AI.
Bots, let's talk about bots again. Do you think, are they flying under the radar now, or do you think they're still striving and alive?
I can say that Instagram bots have been cleaned up to an extent. The daily activity limits are down. The faucets of revenue from starting Instagram growth services have been largely shut off. When I was doing the final batch of research for the book, there was only really one company still operating Instagram growth services. It just seems like it's more than one because this one company owns 10 different websites, but it's really just one company. I think on other sites, we are seeing increasing amounts of user-driven automation. So rather than putting it in someone else's hands and having a botnet where things are done, en masse, now users, people like me and you, are finding that there's Chrome extensions and other types of applications where you log in and it's going to do things as if it's you on your local machine. So with Shark Social, that would be abstracted away to our servers. But now, to get around some of these bot measures we're seeing like on LinkedIn and other sites, yeah, they still exist. But there's this delicate balance. And in my book, I call it the balancing act between people like you and me. We want to extract as much value as possible. But if we notice that all of our friends are running bots, we're going to start complaining. And too many people complaining can cause a real a rift, really, for these publicly traded tech companies and their investors. Because at one point, the investors can say, are these user metrics real or is it all bots? So it's the answer to your question is that it's somewhere in between. It depends on every site. We see a lot more user driven. And unfortunately, we do see a lot of contact detail extraction that is done by automated means. But you or I, we don't see that. We just see the fact that people are selling massive email lists.
Yeah, yeah. It really pains me, actually. Have you ever seen like maybe a YouTube video or on Instagram, maybe a post by maybe a big team? For instance, I support Manchester United, big football team. They do a post and then you're watching the comments and you see all these meaningless comments, sometimes the same.
Mm-hmm.
What are those things? You see a lot of similar kind of comments from different users, but it just has no relation to what the post is about. What are all those things? Who are those people?
This was first identified in 2017, where journalists termed it the internet's most polite version of spam. So rather than you being assaulted with all these links to buy products, instead you're assaulted with comments that tend to be fairly positive or even complimentary, but that aren't responding directly to the content, at hand. This is a practice that, we employed at Shark Social, especially when we were leaving comments. And at this point, it is well known. It's very hard to know exactly why each comment is left, but your intuition is correct in that they are being left by bots. One of the things would be, okay, maybe on YouTube, for example, on YouTube, next to your comment, there's a thumbnail of your account picture. And maybe the thumbnail will be advertising something, often adult-based services, where you might see the comment, you see the picture, and you think, let's click. Then you click on the profile. Then the profile might have a link redirect, or it might have other videos there I've seen like that have very kind of scammy intentions. That's one possibility. I've seen more advanced implementations of this on sites like Reddit, where the accounts are much, much, much more detailed. Like one of the ones I identified last week, it's a postcard bot, and it posts threads on various communities for cities and says, I love your city. Can you please send me postcards from your city? And it seems innocent enough, because you or I would look at it, Chucks, and be like, what is the scam?
Yeah, exactly.
I just need to send you a post. And I don't know what the scam is. It could be more detailed than this. But the truth is that every community that has one of these posts, the post got tons of karma. And there is a usefulness in accounts that have more karma. So sometimes they're leaving these comments, or other bots are then liking their comments to kind of build up the post history and build up the credibility of the bots themselves. But it's very, very complicated, and like the forensic work required is almost impossible for you or I to do.
Yeah, I always wonder what those things are. I mean, and they're often with I don't want to say like the pictures, the DPs and all. They're often weird, and things that you will see on some shady websites.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a human cost to everything that we do. All these things have human cost. So, and you have helped to build systems that hook users, hook people. How do you now feel about screen addiction and digital well-being of users on the internet?
When I grew up with the internet, nobody was looking out for me. There was no guardrails. There was no support. There was no notion of what screen time could be healthy or could be toxic or it could be addictive. It was the Wild West. Today, I think we've made a few important steps. Number one, in restricting access to adult content. But number two, in this notion of screen time. And now many apps have parental controls that you can use to limit maybe how much time a child spends on the internet or on an app. So as far as development goes, I think we've actually made some progress here. In terms of people like me or you, we can make our own choices and we have our own freedom. Of course, everything I've developed was toward adult audiences. And we probably both know people who spend way too much time on it. And yes, there's a pang, like there's a little bit of guilt on my end, but I was just playing the game. And it's just that we're in this space where everything is so quickly iterated on that we can just get the feedback and iterate really quickly. All marketers have been doing this since the dawn of time, but it has not been there hasn't been as much pressure to make their systems or their advertisements more clickable or more addictive. And we can look at this even in terms of video games, right? Like, we know that gambling is probably bad, right? Like, there's a huge human cost there. And I've read even academic studies. I've actually corresponded quite a bit with academics. That was a former research interest of mine. And the point is, we know that it's just net bad. Gambling is bad. But what I find very interesting is that how a gambling machine, a slot machine or video type machine looked was almost totally consistent through the early 2000s and through the mid 2010s, because there wasn't as much pressure and it costs a lot more to develop new physical hardware. What we see now, as things are becoming more, profit margins are maybe down a little bit, but user numbers are up a little bit, we're actually seeing much more addictive slot machines and video machines being placed in casinos. So I think it's one and the same. It's just that unfortunately in the digital space, things go so quickly that to be competitive, it does mean daily experimentation and iteration.
Yeah, it's, to be honest, sometimes I also ask myself the same question, but bro, it looks like you're spending all the time on your phone or on your laptop or something. It's, I think, something that everyone should watch. So guys, you watching us today, make sure you take some time off your phone. Make sure you take some time off your laptops, your screens, and go out to the real world and meet some real human beings. Very, very important for your own well-being. Do you believe that the internet has become more dead than alive? Is that theory valid?
In the introduction to my book, I say that, I'm still very, very optimistic about the benefit that technology can bring to society, and specifically the internet age. And then at the end of the book, it's a very somber conclusion, which I won't reveal here. But we kind of go through this whole, this spectrum of emotions and like the highs and lows of my own experience growing up with it. Very late in the book, I introduced this concept of the dead internet theory, which really was born out of a conspiracy many years ago, where people are thinking, hey, this is really different than what I remember. I haven't made a new friend on the internet in a long time. What if it's all just a facade? Like, what if everything I see is just bot-driven and way beyond what I would intuitively think is actually just curated by bots, created by bots, etc.? And it was a cool thought experiment back then, because there was some controversy about maybe the government had acquired certain startups that could facilitate it. But what really made things explode was generative AI. So many years later, we then got this supercharging of the theory, because it's suddenly significantly easier to create somewhat believable text content, picture content, as well as, other things like music and videos as well. So when I address this in the book, I think, okay, I know the part that I played in it. I was creating fake identities sometimes. In other cases, I was using a real identity, but the activity was fake. Both of these things absolutely further the dead internet theory. And the case I make is that if there is enough profit to be extracted and the barriers, the consequences are quite low, then it will proliferate. And it will proliferate at way, way greater of a rate than human users will join the internet. So it's not to say that you're fake or I'm fake, but it's to say that the magnitude of fakeness compared to realness will eventually it will be overwhelming. And I'm currently at the stance, I'm in the stance where it's getting worse, especially on Reddit. And as younger and younger users who are much more naive to the digital world are getting on here, they don't really know what AI is, or they're calling the wrong things AI. And that's how we get into this loop where suddenly maybe everything we see is like this just jumble of AI generated content. So it's not dead today, but there's a lot of really scary stuff. And I believe my book is actually the first book to address it at length. So I'm really happy to have established that. And one day, maybe I hope someone can read it and say Tim O'Hearn was wrong.
Mm. Guys, yeah, there's some scary things happening out there on the internet. And, I'm just going to say, if you're watching us today, don't believe everything you see on the internet. You need to verify. You need to ensure that you do your own due diligence before you just take things, I've seen a lot of fake things, something that happened in one other part of the world is being rebranded to have happened just yesterday in London, for instance, things like that. There's a lot of stuff going on. So guys, protect yourself. Make sure that you do your due diligence. Let's look at the bigger picture now. You know, you know, in your own words, how would you define digital authenticity in a time when everything is filtered, curated, or just manipulated?
It's becoming very difficult because authenticity now, we're not necessarily saying a fake persona versus a real person, but we're saying, what if a real person, everything they produce is AI generated, so it's like my face, but what if everything I write is from AI or has been outsourced even? I think that's the way I look at it, because even before we had AI and everybody using AI for everything, it was also possible to look at someone's background or someone's content and say, okay, it's very clear that this isn't off the cuff for you, meaning you have a team behind it, kind of essentially ghostwriting, right? And this is something we even see in music, where there's this, especially in rap music in the United States, where you kind of say, okay, we have these artists who traditionally can be solo acts, and there's this notion that they write all their lyrics and that the content is very raw and emotional and also very pleasant to listen to. But then we realize, okay, most of these stars and their hit songs, they're working with writers and composers and whatever. So that is authenticity, and that has nothing to do with AI. In the current world, this bigger picture question is really important because it's becoming harder and harder for me. I'm interacting with other authors. I'm interacting with podcast hosts, and the amount of time I have to spend to actually realize somebody's level of skill and whether they're a good match either to read my book or for me to speak with is extremely time consuming. And this is for me. I read at an extremely fast rate. I like to think I have good critical thinking ability, because the truth is today, I could bring my book somewhere and people would say, oh, wow, you're an author. At the same time, I've evaluated the books of many other so-called authors. And to me, the book and what the book contains actually makes them less credible and less authentic, because it's so easy to publish, and most people either suck at writing or are using AI to do the idea generation through the final cut of editing. So authenticity is a really, really tough question, especially for me, where a lot of my content up to this point has been written, and the written word is becoming so debased by generative AI.
Yeah, it's just so easy, man, isn't it? It's just so easy to hello, ChatGPT, give you a prompt, It's also worry as well for the future of education as well. I saw a video of a lady who was complaining about her students, in her school, who would just use ChatGPT to do her assignments and things. And then she was just complaining that, it's obvious that, this kid didn't write this. And then when confronting the kids, they're like, well, why do I have to stress myself when I can easily just do it on ChatGPT? It's really, really worrying. So do you have any comments on that? Like the future of education, the future of the world, basically. Do you have any worries?
We're in big trouble. We're in really, really big trouble. My father was an educator, and he was in the classroom for many, many years, even to the point where he was helping define policy. And for me, talking to him and now talking to, some of my friends are professors today, it's a totally different landscape. And the earlier people are exposed not only to aids such as ChatGPT, but also screens and Google search. We're seeing huge losses in terms of attainment, educational attainment, and the development of critical thinking ability. The unfortunate part is that even, in America, people still can get far enough just relying on all this stuff, which amounts to cheating. So we need more rigorous ways of kind of snuffing it out, of finding it and stopping it. But I believe in the United States, standardized tests have essentially been a failure for most of my life since the early 2000s. So if standardized tests aren't helping with educational attainment, even in, No Child Left Behind era, which was like the early 2000s, then how in the world are we going to be able to stop ChatGPT? How is it fair to ask any teacher to have to do this without just going back to just pen and paper for everything, right? Like that's the kind of balance where technology has totally outpaced our ability to enforce its healthy usage.
Awesome. We're approaching home stretch now. What advice do you have for SaaS founders or for young engineers really who want to innovate, but also at the same time avoid ethical landmines, which there are a lot of today?
It's really tough. I think when we're thinking about this stuff today, we have to balance our own values versus the desire to make money. And now where we're seeing this, this complete drought of tech jobs, especially entry-level tech jobs, people are being pushed to the fringes of doing things that might not be as ethical or morally correct, even as compared to my era. So yeah, it's the advice is tough. I say it comes down to values, because there are people out there right now who are so proud of the tools they've created on LinkedIn, not realizing that these tools are violating terms of service, just like my tools did 10 years, a little less than 10 years ago. During my era, my peers were very proudly proclaiming how good their automation solutions were on LinkedIn. And then they realized that people started getting sued for it, and now none of them wanted to be interviewed for my book. So it just goes to show that there are some serious consequences here, and it's basically just the same thing being repeated over and over again.
Yeah, we're in some trouble there. A lot of things. I mean, it's been awesome talking to you, Tim, honestly. And guys, I recommend that book as well to you guys. You're going to see a link to that book in the description below. But Tim, before we get on to... let's do rapid fire. Then you give us your final thoughts. And then we can round up today. It's been a very interesting conversation with you. So I'm going to ask you maybe 3 rapid fire questions just to know a bit more about you. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. True or false? Buying followers is still a viable business model.
True. Unfortunately, that baseline social proof is still way more valuable than the $20, $30, $40 that you have to spend to get started.
What is the first app that Tim opens in the morning?
I really don't have any social media apps on my phone, so it would probably just be Gmail.
Wait. Hold on. Did I hear that correct? You don't have any social media apps on your phone?
I only have Strava, which is the athlete one, and I do have LinkedIn as well, but no other apps.
Do you mind explaining to us, why? It might help someone. Why did you take that decision?
I stopped using Instagram a long time ago, and I've also faced a number of bans and other shadow bans as well as actual bans and different types of restrictions there. But in the early 20s, like right before COVID times, I decided that if I spent a little bit less time scrolling social media, maybe I could do something like write a book. And now we can see almost 5 years later, the effect of that was that I wrote a book. So I think a lot of people don't realize how much time is stolen from them just with social media apps on their feed.
Some people are distracted on the road. They're looking on their phones, trying to text somebody on WhatsApp, and then something happens to them. It's happened, things like this. Accidents have happened to people for these reasons. So guys, tell us in the comment section, how long do you spend on your phone in a day? That'll be an interesting one to know. So, okay, I'm going to tell you 3 apps that you might be interested in. Reddit, X, or TikTok. Which of these 3 apps is the biggest illusion?
It has to be Reddit. And the reason is just because of how rife it is for generative AI text content.
Yeah. I always thought that app was fake. I don't know, but anyway. Funny enough, I have it on my phone now. Yeah, I need to reevaluate actually my decisions and have a look at some of these apps and to see if maybe some of them have to go. But Tim, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for blowing the lead off the side of tech. That most people only whisper about. Your story isn't just bold; it's been really, really critical, and I'm sure a lot of people have found value with you, coming to join us today. But before you go, obviously, this is your time to tell us if you've got any events coming up. Tell us a bit more about your book, where people can get it. If you have anything you want people to sign up to, if you have a podcast, if you have a website you want people to check out, they're all going to be in the description below. But just tell us in your own words as you part with us today.
Chucks, thanks for having me on. I've really appreciated it. And for me, I wrote Framed, a villain's perspective on social media to give a totally unique perspective on this mad world of the internet age. And I hope that anyone who reads it can kind of find the same things that I found growing up with the internet and breaking the rules. Anyone who's looking to read more can find it on Amazon, both in the digital form on Kindle as well as paperback. I'm excited to announce that I'm working on the audiobook as well, and it should be released later this summer. Anybody looking to message me specifically, I am on LinkedIn, and also I have a newsletter at beehive.com.
Awesome. All the links to those are going to be, obviously, they're down there, guys. Check it out. Algorithms, if you want to understand how they manipulate us, why clout is currency, and how we got here, make sure you grab a copy of Framed, a villain's perspective on social media. I'm sure from that title you can see how Tim breaks down a lot of things that you did not know. Understand some perspectives. So he's telling us here that he's a villain, guys. He's a villain of social media. So I'm sure he's trying to expose a lot of things that goes on there. So grab a copy of that book. Look at the link in the description below there. And until next time, guys, it's been awesome here. Keep questioning what you scroll through. Keep questioning these things because it just might be scripted. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, to comment, don't forget as well. So please share the video as well, and let us know what you think. And of course, give it a thumbs up. Until next time, guys, take care and God bless.